If you're new here, welcome. If you're one of my old friends, thank you for sticking around while I went on a sudden break. Real life things sometimes takes too much energy, but now all is well, and your favorite storyteller is back with something fitting for Halloween, even though it's already finished. Make sure you're somewhere cozy and let us begin. It's murder. The woman was inconsolable. She was sitting across my desk, weeping, shaking, barely in control of herself. Her hair was tangled and lifeless, her face haggard, her eyes red, her voice cracking, poisoned with a raw, gravelly tone that could only have come from hours and hours of screaming and crying. Mrs. Carlyle. May I call you Janice? Janice. There's no murder. Mr. Lullup is still very much alive. He's dying. We can't say that. His doctors are bound by HIPAA rules, but they've assured us his condition is stable, not terminal. And there's no evidence of any wrongdoing. I'm telling you, he did it. He's responsible. To be clear, and for the record, who is responsible? And for what? My husband. That miserable son of a witch, he did this. My hand found its way to my face. My eyes closed. Ship. I was seriously going to have to explain it to this crazy woman. I'm very sorry, but this is purely a medical issue, not a crime. Mr. Lullup suffered multiple pulmonary embolisms and a moderate stroke, all at once. I understand that's rare, but these things apparently happen. There is no action your husband could have taken to cause this. There's no drug, no physical intervention, no circumstance at all which anyone could have used to inflict that condition upon any other person. Claude clearly had some underlying, undiagnosed issues which all just, happened to show up like this. That's unfortunate, but he was very lucky that help was available right away, or it could have been much worse. No one is responsible. You're not listening. John did this. Gosh darn it. How? Why? What are you trying to say happened? He and she said something indistinct. It sounded like no. She couldn't have said that. Could she? I'm sorry, I didn't quite get that. He put a curse on him, all right. He put a curse on my Claude. A curse? Like some kind of gypsy voodoo thing? Yes. No. I don't know. I don't know how he did it, but he did it. And why would he do such a thing? She drew in a breath and steeled her nerves. I knew the answer, but it was weird that this was the part she felt self-conscious saying. Claude Lullup is my lover. It's been going on for about a year. John found out. I didn't think he would, but I suppose it was always a possibility. I tried to assure him that it had nothing to do with our marriage or our relationship, that it was just something I needed to do for myself. It would come to an end in its own time, and then everything would go right back to the way things were before. She shook her head, still agitated. He didn't listen. He insisted that I break up with Claude right away, or there will be consequences. He said it like that. There will be consequences. I actually laughed at him, I'm sorry to say. God. If I only knew. She fell quiet. I let her. Sometimes the best way to keep someone talking is to create an uncomfortable silence. It worked. I didn't think well. John vanished. Dropped off the radar. I didn't hear anything from him for days. At first, I thought he was off on a hissy fit, because his little ego had been bruised. I figured he'd be back sooner or later, and we'd kiss and make up. Well, I guess it was a little more than a week later that I got that first phone call. It was John. He didn't say anything, he was just breathing at me. It was creepy as hell. I tried to get him to talk, to let me know he was alright, but he clearly wasn't. I got a few more calls like that. That's when I had to take out the restraining order. Right. The goddamn restraining order. That was the only reason I had to listen to this lunatic. Claude Lullup and Janice Carlyle had filed a complaint against her husband, John Carlyle, claiming that he was a potential danger to himself and to others, that he was mentally unstable and potentially violent. It was a strange thing to claim about a 37-year-old analyst from Short Hills with no criminal record, but Lullup had money, a decent law firm on retainer, and some leverage with a friendly judge, so the restraining order went through. Mr. Carlyle was not permitted to be within 500 feet of either of the lovers, their vehicles, homes, and places of business. If not for that exquisitely inconvenient bit of paperwork, none of this would be an issue. But here we are, and now I've got to listen to this crazy witch. So, let me ask you this, ma'am. Do you have any reason to believe your husband violated the restraining order? He must have, right? Can you prove it? Claude is dying. From a massive series of embolisms. You can't just give a man embolisms. And we don't even know if he's dying. The doctors say he isn't. Then it's assault. How's it assault? Assault by curse. That's not a thing. Did he, wave chicken bones at him? What do you think happened? I don't know. You're the detective. So, do some goddamn detecting. That earned her a scowl. A well-practiced scowl, the kind only a 15-year veteran of the force can produce. Here's a tip, folks. If you want the police, or anyone in the public sector to help you out, do not start ordering us around like we're your servants. Sorry, she said, I'm all rattled. I don't know what's going on, I just know okay. I got one last phone call from him, about a week ago, I guess. He breathed at me for a second and said it's done. I put a curse on him. The nastiest one I could manage. Something bad is gonna happen to that home-wrecking son of a witch, and it'll be your fault. I told you there would be consequences. Just watch and wait. When it happens, you'll know what you did. That's what he said. There were tears pouring down her face. I didn't know. I didn't know what it would mean. And now. I mean, just days later, Claude is gonna die. I showed her my poker face for a few more moments. Then I did my best to rid myself of her. Harassment could be a crime. But since those phone calls are from your estranged husband that you wanted to be in contact with, just to let you know he's alright as you said, that doesn't count as harassment. It could also be a crime if he was issuing threats. That means he intended to cause fear or harm. But he wasn't trying to frighten you, was he? You didn't believe in the curse. You just told me I didn't know what it would mean. Maybe he intended to cause harm, but as far as I know, the district attorney does not prosecute witchcraft. I suppose you could interpret anything that happened afterwards as the result of a curse, but there's no way to prove that John caused it. I'm sorry, Mrs. Carlyle. There's no crime here. No crime. No crime, God. 100 years ago, they'd burn him at the stake for this kind of thing. Magic isn't real. Ship, did I seriously need to remind her of that? Then what the duck happened to Claude? A terribly unfortunate medical condition. No one is to blame. Certainly not some witch doctor booga booga nonsense. It's not he put a curse on him. Now he's in the hospital. I don't know how he did it, I don't know how this kind of ship works, but it clearly happened. You can't let him just get away with it. I know people. I've got lawyers, I've got listen to me. Do you hear me? Do you hear me? Detective, she looked around for my nameplate on my desk. I'd introduced myself earlier, but she'd clearly forgotten. Schechter. That's SCH badge 8149. Schechter. Trust me, I will remember that. You haven't seen the end of this. The witch finally left. 2 days later, it caught up with me again. Schechter. When you got a minute. The chief was already on his way out of the bullpen and heading into his office. I know damn well that when you've got a minute means come with me right now, so that's what I did. Close the door. Ship. I closed the door. It's the Carlyle thing. He didn't look any happier about it than I was. You're ducking kidding me. I wish. Look, this lady is like a dog with a bone. She and her boyfriend have some pull, and she's kicking up all kinds of dust. You know it's bullshit, I know it's bullshit, everybody knows it's bullshit, okay. Just go find John Carlyle, interview him, and let's put this one to bed. I can't believe it. Who the hell is this woman? Some rich witch on a rampage. He shrugged and held his hands in the air, the universal sign for what you gonna do. He actually rolled his eyes. Just stick a cork in it, and I'll let you get back to doing some real work. Okay. Fine, fine. I headed out. Damned if I wasn't going to take a few long lunches along the way with this one. It took a week and a half to locate the guy. That surprised me. He had no fixed address anymore. No paper trail. No credit cards, no vehicle. He still had most of the cash she drained out of their joint accounts, and had camped out under an overpass. He'd have been nearly unrecognizable to anyone who knew him. He'd been eating garbage, dressed in rags, unshaven, unwashed, and staggering around, looking like he was drunk. He wasn't drunk though. Or on drugs. It was more like a PTSD kind of thing. Hang around long enough in this job, and you can tell. John Carlyle. It wasn't a question. I was standing over him. He was curled up in some kind of a squat, looking at a puddle of filthy water. He glanced at me, registering my presence, and turned back to whatever it was that held his muddled attention. Used to be. Sidney Schechter. Hey, I'd like to ask about what happened. Can I buy you a cup of coffee? Don't drink the stuff. I somehow got the impression he drank from the puddles he was looking at. As you can see, I'm a very busy man. Lots of important all that needs to be accomplished. Gotta meet my quarterly goals. Nothing isn't going to do itself, you know. I snorted. Funny guy. It worked. He was speaking to me, but not looking at me. Pardon me. The answer to the question that you were about to ask me. Whenever you got around to it, anyway. Yes, I put a curse on that Motheriker. Yes, it worked better than I ever imagined. No, there's nothing you or anyone else can do about it. I suppose you could throw whatever's left of my ass in jail, if you wanted. But I doubt you have any kind of a case. Also, jail would probably be a step up from where I am. Doesn't matter either way. These things have their price, and I'm paying it. I squatted down next to him and looked out over the same puddle. Kind of like we were spending a lazy day on a boat, pretending to fish. How'd you do it? Huh. There's a couple different ways to answer that question. How did I do it? Easy. That's how I did it. It was easy. So, you're some kind of sorcerer. Some kind of magician. Hell, if I could get this guy to admit he was crazy, I could close the file right then. Instead, he closed his eyes, hung his head, and started talking in a clear voice, so quietly I could hardly hear him. That's the damnedest part. I'm not special. Anyone can do it. It's not like some ducked-up Harry Potter bullshit. Most people walk around every day doing all kinds of magic. Little things, mostly. They just don't realize what they're doing, and they don't call it that. What do you mean? It's like every time you give somebody the finger, you're throwing a curse at them. A little tiny one, it probably won't do anything. Every time you give them a kind smile, it's a blessing. A little one. Again, probably won't have a lot of effect. But you just might, duck up somebody's day, or make it better, at least to some degree, if it connects right. That's not magic. It's not high magic. But in its raw, most basic form, that's all magic is. It's using words, symbols, intent, and energy. It's putting a piece of your will out into the world, appealing to or tapping into something greater, and creating a change that you and other people experience. Did you just make that up? Hardly. That's what you'd call a kind of consensus definition. He shook his head. I'm an analyst. I used to work anyway, for a consulting organization. I sift through piles and piles of information, and I look for patterns. I figure out the straight dope about whatever they want to know. I'm good at that job. So when I learned about Janice and her ducking goddamn snail-eating piece of shit boyfriend Ducker, and I decided I wanted to make them pay, that's what I did. Research. My specialty. My strong suit. I kept quiet to keep him talking. There's all kinds of shit out there. Lots of old books and magazines. Lots of old blogs and chat rooms and bulletin boards and online groups and communities. Lots of new TikTok and YouTube and Insta. 90% of it is self-aggrandizing woo-woo bullshit. Plenty of delusionary nonsense. Lots of arrogant gatekeepers. More childishly authoritarian cliques than all the high school locker rooms in the country put together. But once I'd waded through enough of it and learned the language, so to speak, similar threads emerged. Enough people were saying the same kinds of things in different ways, coming from different places, and I got to know what was real, what tends to work. It took months, but I found it. Real magic. He'd started holding his head higher as he was talking. For the first time since I'd come over to him, he was able to look me in the eye. This was the real John Carlyle. Not the wrung-out wretch I'd walked up to a few minutes ago. John. May I call you John? You know there's no such thing. He actually smirked at me. Of course, you're right. The way you're thinking, absolutely. Nobody can cast fireball without using a flamethrower. People don't get turned into toads. You can't change day into night, or walk through walls, or transmute lead into gold. Magic doesn't move any protons, neutrons, or electrons. It's nothing to do with that. I said it happens at the level of our experience. Think about what that means. I don't follow. What do we see? Do we see wavelengths of light? No. We see colors. We see them as pretty, or ugly, or neutral. We feel a certain way about them. Some of those colors make shapes, and we see them as objects, or creatures, or people. They might inspire love, or fear, or longing, or dread. What do we hear? Do we hear vibrations in the air? No, we hear sounds. Some of it's language. Some of it's music. Some of it has meaning. Some of it's just noise. That's the level at which we function. We create and detect meaning. Salience. Implication. Association. There are such things as honor, and respect, and betrayal, and treachery. There's hope, and inspiration, and horror, and suffering, and love. That's the world we actually live in. Magic is just as real as all of those things. When you start talking about matter and energy and stuff like that, well, that's just math. Explanatory abstractions. Theoretical models. Not relevance. That stuff doesn't hit us where we live. Humanity existed for tens of thousands of years before we started thinking like that. But a gentle touch from a loved one. A kiss from your mother. Or a stern expression from someone in authority. Those are the things that truly affect us. As much as I wanted to think of this guy as a crackpot, I couldn't. I worked with all that in my job every day. A stern expression. Hell, I'd pull that on this guy's wife. So magic is psychology. And emotion. That got me another smirk. You're a reductivist. Well, you're not entirely wrong, but you're nowhere near right. There's a lot of psychology and emotion in magic, but that's not even close to the whole story. You might as well say that the best pancakes you ever had, the ones your mother made you one perfect morning when you were 8 years old, the ones that tasted like sunlight, and love, and validation, and the celebration of a new day. They were just wheat. Dry stalks of grass that grew up out of the ground and got smashed into powder. That's technically correct, but it misses the point completely. So what else is going on? I mean, that counts as magic. So much. At the practical level, there's a structure to it. It doesn't matter what you do, but some things have been proven to work pretty well, language and ritual that have the strength of tradition. The important thing is that you're well practiced and can relate to it properly. There's an invocation, then some kind of action or offering, followed by a very specific appeal or petition you're putting forth, and a binding or closure at the end. That's just the basic form of any spell. These things can be however long or short, as casual or as formal as you like, they can involve however many people, and be directed towards anything at all. There's also the motivation and force of will that you put into it, the energy you generate and how you feel about it. It's important to prepare yourself properly, and context is everything. The trickiest part, though, is dealing with whatever or whoever all else you invoke. It can't just come from yourself. What do you mean? There are energies, spirits, zeitgeists, egregores, angels, demons, or gods, elementals, concepts, grandfluins. They have dominions or characteristics related to whatever it is you intend to accomplish. You might be praying for the intercession of a saint, or appealing to the west wind, or making an offering to the spirit of the earth, or whatever. Maybe you're doing it in the name of love, but you're plugging yourself into something. This is the part that sounds like mumbo-jumbo, I admit. But the cold hard fact is that every human civilization in all of history has recognized it, and worked with such things, and made them part of our culture and language and everyday patterns of thought. That does sound like mumbo-jumbo. He turned and looked me square in the eye. His gaze bore straight through me. Tell me that never, ever, at all in your life, you've never stepped into a room and gotten a funny feeling. You've never caught the creeps. Or, take it the other way, you've never stepped into a place and thought, wow, this is nice, I feel right at home here. Tell me that no person has ever come across as wrong, somehow, for no reason you can explain. Or that there's no one you immediately connected to when you first met, trusted them right away, and knew they'd always be your friend. Tell me that's never happened. Say it out loud, Sidney Schechter. I couldn't. I think I'd just let my mouth hang open a little. You're a cop. I'm sure you've developed your instincts, so you know what I'm talking about, I can see it. It's just that simple. There's no science to it, but it works. You can't deny it. It's as real as the ground you're standing on. Hell, you probably learned about this stuff in Hebrew school. Kabbalah, the Gematria, Jewish mysticism. The Israelites learned magic from the Egyptians, you know. Okay. Now we were into woo-woo territory, maybe, but I couldn't simply discount the man. That's the medium in which the art is created. The ritual is the method. The emotion, the psychology and symbology, that's the substance. And the magic, that's the result. The actual experience of it. He turned, standing up now, and looked across into the distance. You asked how'd I do it. I hated the man. In order to curse someone, to really, really curse him, you have to hate him. I had so much hate. I had a rocket ship filled with hate, 10 stories tall, more volatile than liquid oxygen. I used what I'd learned to forge a precisely shaped flame the size of a house, to channel that hate into thrust and send it into low orbit, knowing precisely where it would land. I used it as a weapon, and I unleashed it upon him. That's what I did. He stopped, as if wondering whether he should say the next part. He pulled open his shirt, revealing a tattoo over his heart. It was recent, still sharp and bright, on his filthy grey flesh. I dedicated my life to Alistair, the god of revenge and blood feuds. I sacrificed myself, my life, my happiness and hope, to the cause of divine wrath. The only thing that existed for me was to smite the Mothadiker. But hey, everybody's entitled to an opinion, right? No laws against any of that. Hell, I never even violated that bullshit restraining order. There are some who might say that placing a curse on someone constitutes a threat. Oh, I'm sure. To be fair, communication can be a big part of a curse like this. In order for it to land properly, the target should know he's being cursed. Especially if he knows he's done wrong and feels even a smattering of guilt about it. That feeling, somewhere deep down in his guts, it could channel the curse into his body. That part seems to have worked pretty well. His cruel grimace faded, becoming more contemplative. I decided to go for it. What exactly was it you did? Some kind of ritual? Any other day, I'd tell you to duck off, and I wouldn't say anything without a lawyer. But really, what's the point? I'm clearly not in my right mind, and nothing I did could possibly have caused that man's medical issues, not in any court of law. So, what the hell, I'll tell you. Why not? I created a curse jar. A vessel containing the material components of my rage. I found a piece of garbage, an old salsa jar. It was plastic, dented and leaky. Perfect. I stabbed myself in the guts and filled it with my blood, with my vomit, with my own shit and piss. I desecrated an image of Claude ducking Lelib. He spit on the ground. He once again began to look like the smoldering wreck of a man I'd found. The shadows of it were still in his face. I stabbed that picture with a knife. I dragged and scratched at it. I beat it with my fists, with a hammer, with my forehead. I crumpled it up and jumped up and down on it, tore it to shreds, turned it into garbage, because he is garbage. I put it in the jar. I sprayed it with mace. I screamed and shouted at that jar for 3 days. I threw in some sharp rusty nails, sand spurs, and fragments of old razor blades. I wept and flung my tears at it. Whenever I saw it, I'd curse and hid myself. Some of the bruises are still fading. I chant to it, a long, winding litany of all the misfortune and failure and embarrassment and humiliation and pain I wished upon him. I poured every ounce of my soul into it, and then, when I was exhausted, I'd fall asleep, and I'd start again the next day. My skin was crawling. I felt a cold, deep dread, welling up from the deepest pit of my guts. Something in my soul started shouting at me to get away from this thing that used to be a man. He kept talking. I lost weight. I didn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I was plagued with nightmares and visions. When I had nothing at all left, I bound it up with rough, dirty old twine, and sealed it with dark wax I mixed with ashes and grease. It took me a month. Where is this jar? I don't have it anymore. It's done its job. But where? It's broken. Spent. The curse was released. The payload was delivered. All you'd find is ship-stained waste. If you find anything. He looked back up at me, his face like a corpse's. And I'll never tell. Normally, when I'm interrogating someone, they have something to lose. If nothing else, a man still has his self-image or his ideals. We can use that to keep him talking, to make a deal. That was not true here. This guy, or whatever was left of him, had nothing but the opportunity to keep talking to someone who might listen. So, I took what I could get and waited. After a few more moments of defiance, he relaxed. I don't know if that constitutes a confession. Probably not the one you're looking for. Of course, in order to prosecute me, you'd have to establish that both the asshole and my cheating slut wife believed, at the time, that a broken-down lunatic like me actually could place a curse on him, and that it had a chance of working. Good luck with that. As things stand, all you've got is my admission that I held neither one of them in high regard. And, I exercised private religious devotions which neither of them knew about. Pretty sure that's protected by the First Amendment. You're probably right. I had to ask. It'll be in my report. I'm sure. None of that strikes me as a healthy response to your situation. He coughed out a mirthless laugh. You think? Yeah, it dug me up. I ignored every warning I came up against. Everything I'd learned told me to put up safeguards, wards, layers of protection and distance. Try not to make it personal. I could have hired someone to do it for me. I could have mitigated the effect. I didn't want to. He shook his head. I knew it would splash back on me. I knew it would tear her down, too. Everybody and everything around the situation would get burned. That was the point. I wanted a flaming shipstorm. I wanted chaos and destruction. I wanted to murder the ducking world. And I wanted to die. I had nothing left to live for. This was just as much about my sour slide as it was my vengeance. I just looked at him, stunned. Ship. Did this guy count as a danger to oneself and or others? One thing I read put it really well. Trying to harm someone with a curse is like trying to beat him up by headbanging him with your face. Another mirthless chortle. That's putting it mildly. It's a lot worse than that. Whatever you throw out into the universe, good or bad, comes back at you 3 times as hard. That's the rule. Honestly, it would have been a lot easier to just shoot him, and then eat a bullet. Cleaner, too. Then he started coughing. Things came up. The kind of things you wouldn't ever want to cough up erupted out of his filthy maw and went into the mud in front of him. I still have nightmares about it. But at the time, I still had a job to do. Listen, John. Can I maybe take you someplace? Get you cleaned up? Won't matter. Take me in if you want. Tell everybody that you seriously believe a crazy, broken man really can give a guy an embolism by playing with his own blood and ship and getting really mad. It's not about that. You're not well. Yeah. Like I said. These things have a cost. He looked up at me, his eyes almost entirely dead. Worth it. I scarcely remember it, but my body took control and I backed away in horror. There was nothing human left in that thing. I left him where I'd found him. I didn't sleep that night. Claude Leloup eventually died from complications related to his stroke and embolisms. It took a long, horrible time. His wife never divorced him, instead choosing to inherit his estate outright, though they remained estranged. Janice Carcel divorced her husband John in absentia and never remarried. The story of the curse became the story of her life, which she'd endlessly relate to anyone who would listen. As the years went by, she found fewer and fewer receptive ears. She wasted away, slowly, painfully, and increasingly alone into madness. John Carcel was never seen again. I imagine that what's left of him might still be out there, wandering around somewhere, homeless, shattered, and lost. I still think about that guy. When I do, my blood runs cold and I still don't sleep, even after all these years. That is the end of today's story, my friends. Ultimately, this story is a sad tale of a man broken enough to not even want to stick around to enjoy his revenge. Thank you for sticking around, and I hope you enjoyed today's special. Don't forget to leave a like and comment for me, and I will see you in the next video.